What will be the winning Salesforce models in the future? What type of organization is best suited to do that? And we have here a very interesting group that combines some players who are monoproduct. And this is the case of Greenlight Planet with Anish, who is a founder, or one of the co-founders of Greenlight Planet and its current CEO. We also have Michael Roberts, who runs Hydrologic, which is a spin-off of IDE, but that IDE is involved in many different businesses, but Hydrologic is in water purifiers only. And then we have 3 organizations that, by design, are carrying a broad range of products, being living goods, CE solutions, and Project Dharma with Gaurav. So I'd like to kick off the session with Anish. Anish, you are manufacturing and distributing solar lanterns called Sun King. And you have started your business not so long ago, and you have already, you'll be, I think last year was $7.5 million in sales. You are going, how much will be next year? And what do you think are the benefits of running a specialized sales force?
Well, I'll say,
can
you hear me? Yep, yeah. I'll say our sales will be a lot higher this year. So just to,
like how much higher?
A few multiples. So we're
multiples.
Yeah. So we're selling about 25,000 solar lights a month right now, and just an idea of sort of how we sell is we start off just focused on products. So we build the Sun King solar light ourselves. It's our product, and we realized that there weren't really good channels to get to the customer. So we started focusing on this direct sales model that took us a long time to figure out. But at the beginning of 2012, it was really clicking, and we've been growing very fast. So 2012, we started at about 320 monthly active agents, direct sales agents, and we finished the year at 2,200. And these are in Bihar. We launched in Orissa last year, and we launched in Eastern UP at about halfway through last year as well.
So, but you are a specialized sales force, right? You live and breathe by Sun King.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the benefits of being focused?
Well, I think from a training perspective, it's very effective, and also we have this ability to I think it keeps the credibility of the agents very high. So in many cases, our agents reach penetrations of 40 or 50 or 60% at a household level, and they become known as the Sun King Babu in the village, which is really powerful. And after maybe that 30th or 40th house in the village, people start coming to them. So being known for that one segment of products actually helps reach that sort of critical mass of credibility and where the inbound sales start to come, I think, a lot sooner.
Right. So Anish is running a business. This is not exactly what you are running, Gaurav, right? So how is important, you are about, if I understand well, creating job for disadvantaged people. So how important is it to maximize sales force productivity for you?
It's very important. So I wouldn't say actually that we're not running a business. I think we're running a social enterprise in the true sense. So that means usually what happens in a social enterprise is that it takes a certain time to reach a certain scale. And I think the approach is to invest into systems for the long term. That's what we've been doing. So just, what we're doing is we're creating a sales force of underprivileged people who we are training and uplifting to become sales entrepreneurs. They sell products which have a social impact. So what we're looking at is multiple causes, from anything from access to energy, to indoor air pollution, to malnutrition and health and hygiene. So the idea is really to create ambassadors for the causes who are changing their community. So these people are socially uplifted in terms of standing as well as income. So I think that's a summary.
You have been expanding the product range because the needs are there, but also because this is a way to increase the income of your sales agents. Is this breadth of product range creating extra complexity?
So I would say that each cause we add requires a careful preparation on on the specific products we look at. So we are actually agnostic to the product. We look at what solves the problem, at least parts, bits and pieces of the problem. Let's say if it's anemia, we're looking at a nutritional drink. And we try to work with the corporates who are interested in addressing the need. It does increase complexity, but there is synergies across the products. Otherwise, we would not be doing it.
What kind of synergies?
So if someone has become respected in the village for a health cause, it's easier to add another cause. So I think the person is a person of respect in the village. And secondly, in terms of the communication skills we have building in the people, it's obviously easier to add another cause for them.
I see. So would you buy insurance from your doctor?
Well, but it's not as diverse. That's a simplification, I'm sorry. But we're not selling insurance. So I think it's not as simple as that. So as long as we're focusing on health, we are fine. Obviously, we're not trying to sell non-social impact products. So there's a lot of pyramid schemes in the market anyways, which you have to kind of fight against. But we're not, it's not as simplistic. We're looking at verticals and causes, and they're usually related. So it's a synergetic thing.
Yeah, so the notion of there needs to be a coherence of products.
Yeah.
And Greg, you are also running a network of sales agents in Guatemala that is carrying a broad product range. Could you tell us a bit about this, and how do you select these products?
Yeah, well, first of all, our mission overall is social impact. So how can we get out to vulnerable rural communities primarily and provide products and services that offer a positive health, energy, economic, and environmental impact? In terms of choosing the products, in terms of understanding the problems and the needs, certainly women entrepreneurs who are empathetic and share the same experience as people in the villages are naturally great people to be able to diagnose needs and solve those problems. And generally speaking, when you look at a typical family in a community, they're cooking on the floor, they don't have clean water, they oftentimes don't have electricity or they're common brownouts, they don't have access to vegetable seeds, they don't have access to vision care. So you have this whole breadth of challenges. And then within those challenges, obviously you have to pick the right solutions. And it's an iterative process. And a couple just quick things to touch on. First and foremost is by design, what we're trying to do is offer within each solution, so let's say within offering cook stoves or solar lights, is to not necessarily have one choice or not have choice overload with too many, right? So you try to have, in terms of the cost and in terms of the characteristics of the product, to have a variety of different, because different people are going to want to choose different things. And then in addition to that, each product, let's say, serves very different purposes. And when you talk about gardening, let's say, and I would think oftentimes there's, within an organization, within the social enterprise that we create, there's a garden of products. But then in terms of actually going out to communities, sometimes you're going to be hunters and sometimes you're going to be gardeners. And I'll use two examples. So for example, with vegetable seeds, which we offer, and put them in small packs, is probably, many have seen, can be very effective. People in communities don't have access to vegetable seeds. And you can never start a business having entrepreneurs go out and sell vegetable seeds. You simply wouldn't have the margins, it wouldn't work. And so there's small products like that, vegetable seeds, energy efficient light bulbs, that you can piggyback onto the other products. And that's where you need a garden to be able to push it out there. You need to be able to sell eyeglasses or cook stoves or solar lights to be able to then add those on and be able to sell those in the community. They don't necessarily generate a lot of income, but they generate credibility, and they obviously solve a social problem. And then with other products such as solar lights or with cook stoves, you might go out and originally garden to assess the needs, and then you'll go to a particular area and hunt, or vice versa, right? So you'll see that a certain community has a need for solar lamps because there are 100 families and nobody has electricity. Well, after you've gone out and diagnosed the needs by going out with a variety of different products, then you'll have somebody who'll just be dedicated to go out and solve the solar lamp problem. So I think it's looking at each solution, having a basket of solutions that solves those needs that have been diagnosed by the community members and the entrepreneurs, and then deciding within each solution, each community, what's the proper strategy based on what are the needs.
Very good, thank you. Now, Chris, you're also running with Living Goods, a multi-product distributor But at the origin, really the root of this program is a network of community health workers that are providing health services to a given number of families. And you have added products to these services. Now you are moving, or you are trying a very different model, and I'm curious to know the difference between the old model and the second model.
So when we started with Living Goods, we had a more limited product portfolio, and it was focused predominantly on health products. And we mapped out the sales territories for all of our agents. They had exclusive territory, and they served a set number of households, and through routine, frequent door-to-door visits and providing treatments for malaria, diarrhea, respiratory infection, nutrition products. They built the trust with their customers over time and we saw an opportunity to expand the product portfolio. We're selling Sun Kings, we're selling cook stoves, we're selling a number of other products. But there is a limit to how much an agent can earn because they have an exclusive territory. What we have now tried to test with a new branch that we actually just launched in September of last year is what we call Living Goods Open, where it's no longer exclusive territories. Agents can recruit agents, which we hadn't tested before, and this is much more of your traditional multi-level marketing kind of network like a Natura or an Avon. So now you've got no longer exclusive territories, and agents can really build a business by recruiting what are called downlines, that they get bonuses on referral as well as compensation on top of what each downline sales are able to generate. That single branch has grown in just 4 months to be it's 3 times larger than our average branch size. And it's about twice as, generates twice the revenue, and so in 4 months that branch is actually profitable.
Very, very interesting. Now, Michael, Hydrologic is a spin-off of IDE. IDE, which most people in the room will know well, is actually active in a number of different products, such as latrines, water pumps, etc. But Hydrologic is actually focused on water purifiers, even though your mother organization, if I may say, is multi-product. So have you considered at some point leveraging the sales force of Hydrologic to carry a broader range of products?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. The long answer is no. We started up, Hydrologic evolved out of a donor-funded project where it was always set up to be partial cost recovery. It reached a maturity where we said this should now be spun off as a separate enterprise, and we did that starting in 2009. And it was focused specifically and exclusively on water filters. Also in Cambodia, where Hydrologic is, there's 2 other programs where we're developing direct sales forces, one in agriculture, one in sanitary latrines, and the one in Hydrologic. We find that in agriculture, for instance, it is a multi-product network, or a line of products. And the main reason there is that one product alone won't do the job. To improve farmers' agricultural production, they need a range of products to help solve a range of solutions. So you can't just sell a packet of seeds. You need fertilizer, you need irrigation, you need knowledge to go along with that to help people be successful in farming. Whereas with water filters, it's a much simpler problem. A simple technology can actually deliver the whole solution. And so that's where we ended with that one. In setting up these parallel chains, distribution networks, one of the things that we've learned over the last several years is that to professionalize that sales network, it's a fairly intensive proposition to develop the training materials, to develop the promotional materials that the sales agents will use, and having that be too diversified is problematic, or at least it would take time. An additional factor is one that was brought up before, is coherence. With the agricultural products, there are many products, but they are a coherent whole. They're aimed at solving a particular problem for that rural household. We have made attempts to sell water filters through that network, for instance, but with very, very limited success, because the Sales agents are focusing on one set of problems with that client and spending the time helping that client to be successful in the agricultural area, and just either don't make time or have not been effective at selling other products like water filters. With the two remaining channels, the water filters and the latrines, we think, though, that there is possibility for convergence there, because, we think that that's maybe a more coherent bundling of products. If we can bundle products that relate to water and sanitation and health in that way, that's a more coherent concept to sell. And so we have been piloting now, or beginning to pilot, this idea of bundling water filters with latrines and linking that to microfinance. So we have high hopes that will work. We don't have good proof yet, but it will take a bit of effort to develop the promotion materials, the sales approach that will be effective, to develop the training for the salespeople and for the sales managers to manage that new bundle of products. So it's not something that you can just introduce very quickly, is what we've found.
Thank you very much. As we have at least three multi-product distributors in the room, one of the initiatives we discussed over the last couple of days was the idea that these multi-product distributors, not only are they facing challenges in marketing and selling to their customers, but also in sourcing the products from a varied set of manufacturers. And so one initiative that came up during our discussion was the creation of a central buying group. Could Greg and Gaurav explain a bit what you have in mind?
So the idea was I think there's a lot of synergies across, the different verticals. So the products that, subject to local considerations, obviously, which we are buying across the countries are quite similar. So what we were looking at was to kind of create a buying group which can synergize the procurement, the training, and the buying, and a few other functions across our group. And I think that's something hopefully we'll pursue out of this event. Great.
Yeah, I'd just say, if you look overall at what we're all interested in, be it manufacturers or certainly distributors, is impacting as many people's lives as possible through what we do, and so that's about volume, right? And to be able to get volume and reach as many people as possible, we want to be able to have as many efficiencies as possible in terms of the cost of the products and what we're doing. And I guess when I just look at it as a few of the challenges that are probably quite obvious to everyone in the room, is certainly from a cost perspective. Oftentimes individually as organizations, it's difficult for us to reach economies of scale at certain points of time. But as a group, if you look at distributors, we're buying the same things. We all want to buy the Sun King, right? And it makes a lot of sense for us to get together and buy at the same time. It helps us to get lower costs and efficiencies in terms of logistics and administration. And at the same time, it helps Greenlight Planet to be able to produce and not have to go out to people individually. So we can lower costs through this buying group as well. Apart from simply lowering costs, is how can we be more effective? And by setting up a buying group as the impetus, is kind of a trigger, we can learn what each other's doing and what products are working, what products aren't working, how our strategies or tactics differing. So it's this forced conversation that brings us together. And then ideally from a manufacturer's perspective, certainly if there's a buying group, and not that you're having this challenge, but across various product categories, it could be that a certain manufacturer has extra products that they'd like to sell in a given period of time. Well, the manufacturer can then reach out to a whole host of different distributors at the same time and offer that. So these are all challenges. I think that we encounter these individual challenges, and certainly forming a group and working together, we can lower costs, we can increase our effectiveness in terms of choosing what might work, products and strategy, and then we can create ideally a very positive, mutually beneficial relationship with manufacturers and get better understanding of each other's needs.
Is this true, Anish? Is this your distributors coming together? Is this a threat or an opportunity?
I think it's an opportunity, and I think the challenge in this space is that we're all young companies, whether it's on the product side or on the distribution side. Somehow we end up being kind of both.
Oh, both,
But
yeah.
we have to work with a lot of channel partners to get our products out there. I think the challenges can be around scale. So purchasing products on FOB basis across seas from China to Africa or other parts of the world takes time. It takes capital lock, and sales go like this. But if you have to import like this, it's very hard to finance. So I feel like anything which can aggregate the need and smooth out the product out is helpful for us, and it also means it's more efficient from a cost perspective. So I think it's a great thing. Yeah.
Fantastic. You are recruiting a lot, aren't you? How many people have you recruited this year?
Quite a few, yeah. So I think our sales model, I think maybe similar to Living Goods, is run by a totally variable paid, sometimes part-time, sometimes full-time salesperson. And I think at least on our side, we see that there is always an attrition. And sometimes that attrition is healthy. So in an early period of recruitment, we look for survivability past, say, the first 90 days. And for us, because it is a very high-scale business in terms of people, 2,000 people, the training often starts after that 90 days. And so we need a testing ground. And I think in these variable direct sales models, this is just sometimes a best practice we've seen in other industries that we try to use. So I think as we scale, one of the ways we're able to limit the training cost, despite having a lot of people, is training starts after 90 days. Yeah.
And I think it's a common feature we have seen in many of these organizations.
I can take the first half. I think what's interesting now is that we see a pretty wide distribution of agent types. And in the second model that I referred to that we're testing out now, you have some agents who are quite qualified in selling cook stoves and energy products, and they really understand the economic argument. You have other agents who are quite comfortable in providing health treatments and services and identifying pregnant women. So there's agent sort of natural selection around some of the products that we sell, as well as the opportunity to cross-sell, but they do sort of naturally develop some level of specialization.
So what happens usually is when we started selling solar lights in 2009, penetration was absolutely limited. So we used our model to kind of make them mainstream. What happened over time, over the last 3 years of us selling them, they became more mainstream. So they were introduced into the retail channel. So I think your question was, what happens if channel conflict happens? I think it's something which once we've made the behavioral change in the village, it happens by design, right? And it is fine that that happens, but that's actually the reason why we have to add other products, because we want to maintain the livelihood of the person by giving them the next cause. But the idea, that's why it's a social enterprise, because you're not going to be exclusive and maximize that, but you're going to create this behavioral change and then keep building the next cause. And I think that's part of the mission. So it's good to become, for the product to become ubiquitous to some extent.
Very good.
A couple of things about that. I mean, and this is just my own personal view from my experience. Although water is, needless to say, the most essential thing in life, I have found, and maybe we can share some differences, but water filters in particular are one of the most challenging products to sell. And if you look at that, if you contrast that with near vision glasses, which our entrepreneurs sell, and we talk a lot about people have to understand the risk, and we talk with Toyota looking at the cook stove, so they have them out there for a month so people can understand the risks and the benefits and make that cost-benefit decision. If you look at eyeglasses, right, a woman gives a basic eye exam, she puts a pair of glasses on the person, and instantaneously they can see the impact on their lives, right? When you drink a glass of purified water, nothing changes, right? And so it's a much more challenging, especially because people have had workarounds over hundreds and thousands of years of not having clean water. It's a much more challenging sell. Having said that, that obviously makes it that much more important. And so I think from the central buying group is what we really talked about is that not just from a cost perspective or buying in bulk, let's say, was this going to be beneficial, but also best practices. So it will force us, in a very positive way, to talk and to try to work together to solve these problems. And obviously, as we all know, one of the greatest challenges in this field is that knowledge and sharing and leveraging is so incredibly fragmented. And so to the extent that we can make this less of a fragmented enterprise and be working together on this, and this conference is a fantastic example of that, then ideally we'll be able to come up and share those solutions with each other, which has already taken place over these last couple of days, and now I'm going to totally overload my entire team with all the great ideas from these people up here. So.
Question.
Yes, Olivier detailed a bit of our program in the introduction of how we're using mobile technology already among our agent workforce. And so we have started to scratch the surface where all of our agents using their own featureless phones use simple SMS codes when they make a key intervention with a customer. So whether that's registering a pregnant woman, a newborn, a key treatment. And that's data that we can then collect in real time. It can enable performance management, so we can look at across our agent network where are we doing, where are we performing, where are we underperforming, where are the outliers, and we can respond quickly to that. And it also, then from a customer relationship management perspective, it allows us to interact directly with our clients by sending them automated marketing messages, in the case of either treatment reminders, or an opportunity to purchase a clean delivery kit for a pregnant woman, starting fortified foods for a newborn child. So it starts to build that relationship with our customers that then sort of softens the ground for agents when they're making a direct sale. But it's still early days for us, and so there's an opportunity, I think, to look across our product portfolio and try to better integrate technology into our platform.
Anish, I would like you also to tell a bit about what you're doing, because the opportunity sounds great and is exciting, but clearly we have issues of literacy, both from the Salesforce side and the customer's side. We have issue of the variable cost, because text messages, if we happen to have some mobile operators in the room, don't come for nothing. So when you start talking about large volumes, clearly this represents a high variable cost. And the setting up of all these things is also a significant fixed cost, even though there are quite a few open source solutions out there. Still, it's a big investment and a big risk for organizations as yours. So what Greenlight Planet is also trying out something with IT, right?
So we've been about 8 months into our saga, and it's not over yet. But we've been building an SMS-based system, I think, and we've been really excited to hear about what Living Goods is using. And effectively, it starts on the production line. So every unit is serial numbered and barcoded. It goes in the case, and then it's QR coded, so we know it's in the box. It gets imported. It goes out of the warehouse in Bihar, Orissa, and UP, and it's scanned when it goes out. And then when it's sold by an agent in that locality, they'll register using the customer's phone, and we do that as a way of connecting with the customer directly afterwards, and also as an enabler for performance management. So it's something which we're actually road testing in UP this week. So I was able to leave India when all the problems started coming in. So, but we're hopeful in a few months to have this thing really running, and it's exciting for us because I think thousands of people knowing your sales data 10 days after the month close is a killer for being able to react quickly.
Anyone else wants to say? Michael, please.
Maybe just to make a general comment that this was a very common theme amongst every organization that took part in the workshop preceding this conference. And almost every organization is doing something, at least very rudimentary, but sees big potential and sees risks. So I mean that if there are experts in the room, if there's a doctor in the house, I think we'd all be interested to know what other solutions or things have been tried.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, I guess just for context, when Olivier presented I think I fit in the #1 group of organizations that are we're referring to Guatemala in the context of our workshop here, but Guatemala is in many regards our incubator. And then our whole focus has been on not just doing it ourselves, but as well learning from the model and best practices, and then replicating with partners in other countries and then disseminating knowledge. And so we first started in Guatemala in 2003, 2004. You can probably tell I'm not Guatemalan, but I lived there for about 5 years. And then we moved to Ecuador, Nicaragua, bit in South Africa, and now working in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And so, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I would say one thing is, as we all know, these needs are universal. They're different, obviously, based on cultural, societal preferences in terms of what kind of water filter, what kind of solar light is, as you well know, whether it be the S1 or the S10 or what have you. But what we found is, from our own perspective, because so much of, I think, and don't mean to get too theoretical here, but because so much of, I think, the methodology of the way that we do things can be counterintuitive, right? As we learned with, for example, reading glasses, right? We used to have more of, years ago, we trained women to give basic eye exams and sell reading glasses. And we said, start off, when you're doing this, after your training, start off in your community and start off by offering them to your family, and then you're sort of your circle of trust, right? Then your friends, and then the community will trust you. And woman came back and said, well, it's not working. This isn't working. What are we gonna do? And and basically she said, in Spanish, nadie es profeta en su propio pueblo. So nobody's a prophet in their own town. What did we learn from that? Well, we learned that Yoli used to be a homemaker, and then she went away with a bunch of gringos, and 5 days later, she's an eye doctor. Yeah? Nobody believes her, right? So what did she have to do, ironically and counterintuitively, is for people to trust her, she has to go somewhere where people don't know her. Yeah? These types of ironies and counterintuitive elements mean that you really have to learn it. And so we found it's important to work from within. So when we expand to Ecuador, it's people who become country directors and teach and train who have been in Guatemala for a while. So to have that central place where people can get their initial training, and then leadership goes to other places and either leads or embeds themselves in organizations to help them learn those counterintuitive elements so they don't sort of line up, tick things off based on their own understanding to begin with, has been critical. And so I think at the end of the day, in order for real dissemination and expansion, there have to be certainly guidelines of things that are going to change in every culture and every country, and they should change based on the different organizations and how they work. But what we've been seeking is, how do you find those 10 things that really make it tick, right? A lot of the best practices, for example, that Olivier is talking about, but on a very tactical level. Yeah, for each product and each service, what are those things that make it tick that are somewhat non-negotiable that unfortunately we learned by falling on our faces all the time?
Anish, you are distributing Sun King in India, but you are also manufacturing and selling it in other countries. So you are dealing with different distributors, including living goods. Don't you become a bit impatient in seeing them making the same mistakes? Would you want them to talk to each other a bit more? How do you handle that?
I do. I mean, I think this is great. So I think anything which helps one of our partners sell better is great for us. I think as a business, we've ended up in this weird spot where we're a products company that's selling all over the world through partners, and in India through partners, and we have our own channel in India. And the channel was sort of our reaction to impatience. That how do we get to this market? And I think along the way, we've taken a lot of punches ourselves and fallen on our face a lot, figuring out how to make this model work. But the cool thing for us is that while we can run it in some geographies in India, we can take some of those learnings, like the information systems, which we're starting to build competencies in, performance and compensation analytics, training methodologies, and we can take those to partners and say, hey, we don't know everything, and Nigeria is not Bihar, but maybe there's some similar issues that we have some ideas on that you can benefit from. So I think it's actually become a very interesting way for us to, one, see the business from the eyes of our partners, and also to be able to offer some practices ourselves, and also learn from our partners. Yeah.
Excellent.
interestingly enough, in East Africa at least, status and respect is as big of motivation for our agents as monetary reward. So we don't have quite the same cutthroat mentality that maybe in these markets we're accustomed to with salespeople to overcome. Many of our agents are really motivated by the respect and the recognition that they get in their communities, and will often go above and beyond in terms of not making a house call for a sale, but actually caring deeply about the client that they're serving. I mean, I've seen agents taking pregnant women on boda-bodas to a clinic to deliver a child, and there's no sales opportunity there, and it's something that they do on their own regard. So I think, certainly the organization is positioned as one that is about improving lives and making an impact, and that's part of the general recruitment. So there's a filter that certainly happens in that regard. But I also think culturally, there's an advantage in the communities that we work in, is that they have a deep conviction to trying to serve their neighbors and families.
Can I say one thing really quickly? And I would agree with Chris wholeheartedly in terms of motivation, right? We talk about financial motivation oftentimes, but as we all know in our own lives, we do things for a lot of different reasons. It's not just about the money, and I think that's true anywhere. And I would say also it's probably it's trying to create this sort of a virtuous value chain, so to speak. So if you think about all the different pieces that ensure that, obviously it's the core values of your own organization and your own leadership. By the same token, it's the core values of the green light planets and the D lights and what they're producing and why they're producing it. A self-selection mechanism where people get to learn about the opportunity and the benefits of it and the types of things that they'll be offering means that you're going to have the entrepreneurs who are potentially the best fit. As well, if you're going out to villages and people are having to present what they're offering, you have gatekeepers in those villages. So it's very self-policing in that way, whereby a local pastor or mayor or association isn't going to let you into that village unless you're selling something that truly has value. So I think it's a combination of factors that in their totality mean that you're going to find people who really share the same type of values and see it as an opportunity, not just to earn a living, but also to create community impact.
So just one thing to add there, I think in our case is also local people, so that's why probably most of these people will stay in the village for a large part of their life, so they have a lot to lose in terms of reputation. So I think that's one of the key things. That's why we really focus on selecting local people. The second thing is obviously there's always going to be some percentage of issues around overselling and other things which happen. So it's clear, what we've been working on there is initially we were open in terms of selecting people. Now we've developed a screening process around values. So we're trying that. It's very difficult to do this because of literacy levels and other issues, but we clearly see that we only take certain profiles, and from the past experience we have learned that. The second thing is there's a policing process where there's a direct line for the consumer to call us, which means that if there's any issue or anything has happened, there's a direct, transparent process. So that is in itself a deterrent in itself. So I think just two things we're doing.
Yeah, I'd like maybe just to contribute one little fact, which is when in the presentation we gave, when we looked at the percentage of people who had bought a product but were not using it 2 years later, which is a sign that they were being oversold, that actually they didn't need it or they were not able to use it. Interestingly, what was driving this oversell was not usually commercial motivations. Because the people who sell commercially know that word of mouth, in the end, will be their best friend or their worst enemy. So they cannot take the risk of overselling. So people who tend to oversell are people who are in a hurry. And usually it's because they're in a hurry to meet the goals set by grant-making institutions. So that it's because they will meet the numbers that they will get the new grant. The people will get only the money from customers over time would be shooting themselves on the foot to oversell, because it will bite them back very quickly. So overselling is an issue, but the source of the problem might not be what one would think.
So it's a challenge, and it's a challenge to do it accurately and precisely and on a large scale. So any system you come up with is a compromise of some sort, especially in a commercial environment. With Hydrologic, what we have done with the people who buy from our direct salespeople is in each of the territories, we've hired a quality control agent who a couple of weeks or a month later goes back and visits that household just to find out, are you using it? Have you run into any problems? Do you really know how to clean it? Do you want some help? And to try to make sure that they are, in fact, getting the benefit out of it. And at that time, we can determine, a sort of a 1 month usage rate. And then periodically, we will do bigger studies looking at longer-term usage rates and actual effectiveness in terms of health outcomes. And that has been supported and encouraged most recently because we've accessed carbon finance through the gold standard accreditation facility, and they insist on that kind of periodic check and justification. So with carbon financing has allowed us to maybe go a bit farther than a straight commercial enterprise might be able to in measuring and documenting that social impact.
So there's two things in our model. So we have a social impact on the livelihoods created, which is quite simple. Well, it's not simple, it's difficult to measure, but it's still easier to measure than a cause impact. So if I see the first 5 entrepreneurs we hired, I mean, it's amazing how they develop, and you can see the financial impact as well as the self-confidence and personal development impact. So I think that's an easy one, relatively. The second one is around the causes. That is difficult. So I think what we've been doing now is it's still simpler with the light because you can see the impact in terms of kerosene, and you can actually have feedbacks and you can have random checks. But it's harder in the case of anemia, where we're trying to measure a long-term impact of a nutritional drink. Now, I mean, we have been working with the different corporate partners, and we're working, what we're going to launch in the next years, so this year in the third quarter, is a model where we will test with independent research agencies to have random sampling around the cause, and that will be funded by our corporate partner, which is showing that it's kind of both the responsibility of both to do this. So that's something we're working on, but it's a very difficult subject, and I think any thoughts from the audience, I think it would be exciting actually to share best practices.
I think in the workshop, IT was an exciting topic, but the next most exciting topic was the notion of Net Promoter Score, i.e. asking people whether they would recommend this product to their friends, which is, I know, is a shortcut to measuring social impact, which assumes that people know what's good for them. But I think we also need to respect the fact that they are wise and they would not recommend a bad product to someone else. Now, I think also it's interesting that the company or the organization that had invested first and was more focused on measuring Net Promoter Score and incentivizing the sales force around Net Promoter Score was the most commercially driven of all organizations. So, and the ones who were not even interested in finding out why some customers were not using
of values and see it as an opportunity, not just to earn a living, but also to create community impact.
So just one thing to add there, I think in our case is also local people, so that's why probably most of these people will stay in the village for a large part of their life, so they have a lot to lose in terms of reputation. So I think that's one of the key things. That's why we really focus on selecting local people. The second thing is obviously there's always going to be some percentage of issues around overselling and other things which happen. So it's clear, what we've been working on there is initially we were open in terms of selecting people. Now we've developed a screening process around values. So we're trying that. It's very difficult to do this because of literacy levels and other issues, but we clearly see that we only take certain profiles. And from the past experience, we have learned that. The second thing is there's a policing process where there's a direct line for the consumer to call us, which means that if there's any issue or anything has happened, there's a direct, transparent process. So that is in itself a deterrent in itself. So I think just two things we're doing.
Yeah, I'd like maybe just to contribute one little fact, which is when in the presentation we gave, when we looked at the percentage of people who had bought a product but were not using it 2 years later, which is a sign that they were being oversold, that actually they didn't need it or they were not able to use it. Interestingly, what was driving this oversell was not usually commercial motivations. Because the people who sell commercially know that word of mouth, in the end, will be their best friend or their worst enemy. So they cannot take the risk of overselling. So people who tend to oversell are people who are in a hurry. And usually it's because they're in a hurry to meet the goals set by grant-making institutions. So that it's because they will meet the numbers that they will get the new grant. The people who will get only the money from customers over time would be shooting themselves on the foot to oversell, because it will bite them back very quickly. So overselling is an issue, but the source of the problem might not be what one would think. We have a question here in the middle. Someone else afterwards? Yeah, sorry, Michael, go ahead, please.
Michael Fürst, Novartis. You know, the topic of this session here is how to reach scale. And one thing you need in order to reach scale is, of course, to have the right sales model and to incentivize the sales force in the right way. But the other thing you need, I believe, in order to reach scale is to have social impact. And we as a pharmaceutical company, we have a social business, but we are questioned very often whether the model we are running does really create the right social impact. And that's a question on measurement. And I'm wondering, does someone on the panel have tools or experiences how you measure the social impact and maybe the health outcomes you are creating? Now, we can all silently assume that we do this, but I'm wondering, can we really measure it? And if yes, what are the tools you're using it?
Who has experience measuring social impact? Michael?
So it's a challenge, and it's a challenge to do it accurately and precisely and on a large scale. So any system you come up with is a compromise of some sort, especially in a commercial environment. With Hydrologic, what we have done with the people who buy from our direct salespeople is in each of the territories, we've hired a quality control agent who a couple of weeks or a month later goes back and visits that household just to find out, are you using it? Have you run into any problems? Do you really know how to clean it? Do you want some help? And to try to make sure that they are, in fact, getting the benefit out of it. And at that time, we can determine, a sort of a 1 month usage rate. And then periodically, we will do bigger studies looking at longer-term usage rates and actual effectiveness in terms of health outcomes. And that has been supported and encouraged most recently because we've accessed carbon finance through the gold standard accreditation facility, and they insist on that kind of periodic check and justification. So with carbon financing has allowed us to maybe go a bit farther than a straight commercial enterprise might be able to in measuring and documenting that social impact.
So there's two things in our model. So we have a social impact on the livelihoods created, which is quite simple. Well, it's not simple, it's difficult to measure, but it's still easier to measure than a cause impact. So if I see the first 5 entrepreneurs we hired, I mean, it's amazing how they develop, and you can see the financial impact as well as the self-confidence and personal development impact. So I think that's an easy one, relatively. The second one is around the causes. That is difficult. So I think what we've been doing now is it's still simpler with the light because you can see the impact in terms of kerosene, and you can actually have feedbacks and you can have random checks. But it's harder in the case of anemia, where we're trying to measure a long-term impact of a nutritional drink. Now, I mean, we have been working with the different corporate partners, and we're working, what we're going to launch in the next years, so this year in the third quarter, is a model where we will test with independent research agencies to have random sampling around the cause, and that will be funded by our corporate partner, which is showing that it's kind of both the responsibility of both to do this. So that's something we're working on, but it's a very difficult subject, and I think any thoughts from the audience, I think it would be exciting actually to share best practices. I
think in the workshop, IT was an exciting topic, but the next most exciting topic was the notion of Net Promoter Score, i.e. asking people whether they would recommend this product to their friends, which is, I know, is a shortcut to measuring social impact, which assumes that people know what's good for them. But I think we also need to respect the fact that they are wise and they would not recommend a bad product to someone else. Now, I think also it's interesting that the company or the organization that had invested first and was more focused on measuring Net Promoter Score and incentivizing the sales force around Net Promoter Score was the most commercially driven of all organizations. So, and the ones who were not even interested in finding out why some customers were not using their products happened to be grant funded and NGOs. So again, I think the notion of ensuring customer satisfaction and being driven by that and living because of that is probably a good guide going forward. Greg?
Yeah, just one point on this. Is I think that, not to be controversial in any way, but I think one of just the challenges, and I don't know if my colleagues would agree with me, just when we use this term social enterprise, is a balancing act, right? Because 50% of people want us to be exactly like enterprises, and the other 50% of people want us to be exactly like NGOs, right? How do you balance those two things with extremely limited resources? And so I think different social enterprises, different leadership make choices as to what they measure, right? I mean, us in particular, if we look at cook stoves or solar lights or water purifiers, we measure, afterwards the usage and are people using these, and we do follow-up because it's smart business to do so. But we don't necessarily measure the social impact of a cook stove or a water filter because we simply we don't have the resources, and we simply assume drinking pure water is a good thing, right? But we do measure economic impact. So you have to make, I think, a lot of difficult choices within the resources that you have and where your focus is at that particular point in time.
That's a nice last question. Back to the bottom line. So who makes money here?
We're at about break even right now.
Break even meaning covering overhead.
Yes, covering costs. It's for the social enterprise in Guatemala in particular. And I think it's interesting. I think so much of it simply is what assumptions are we using? Yeah, because it's a function of capital. It's a function of inputs. Yeah, the more inputs you have, the more outputs you can produce. And what's interesting, I think, is even as we talk about the different models, is some of us, in our example, for example, Living Goods with Michael, or some of us have chosen to garden first, right? So first we build out the product mix, yeah, and then decide where to prioritize, yeah. And so the investment goes into figuring out the products, and then later you get into expansion of the sales force. So we're at that stage where we're now investing in expanding the sales force, not so much in the products. Others, if we look at Toyota, yeah, the example is we'll focus on stoves now, building out the sales force, and then we're going to add on. Yeah, so I think you've got a lot of different things here, but what I would say is certainly it's different, as you well know, across geographies. But I don't have a good answer for you. I can tell you that we first started with one product in 2004 with about $19,000 to invest. And now the company in Guatemala has been increasing its revenues by about 65 to 70% a year over the last 3 years after we built out the product mix. So it takes time. If we had more financial resources at our disposal, I would imagine it would have been a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Just to comment, we're not profitable, but I think when we started, we had this idea for a direct sales channel, and it sounded really great. And we raised a little bit of seed funding, and when we did, as soon as we got that check, our angel investor sent me this paper, and the paper had this really simple idea, but it's a really powerful one. Take all of your sales force costs, everything for the regional offices, the training costs, the meetings, their salaries, everything, divide by the number of salaried people you have, and that's fully loaded cost. and keep it really small until the average gross margin of that salaried person covers the fully loaded cost. And just keep it as small as possible to be able to test ideas effectively. And then as soon as you hit that you cross that number, then okay, and now everything, the sales are covering their costs to start growing. And I think for us, the journey was really taking a little bit of discipline and keeping it very small, few districts in Bihar, which was a tough market we found, and just really trying everything for years. I mean, it took us years to get there, and then at the beginning of 2012, everything, the numbers started to work, and then we just turned it on and have been growing it since. Yeah, I think that was just a really useful lesson that we learned really early on. And right after that email, the comment in the email was, so don't lose all this money.
Right.
Don't spend it all.
One last answer. Are we done? Because I think our colleagues are having their break. They went faster than us. So thanks everybody for your presence and your good questions.